Hello and welcome to the Rugby Show here on the 42.ie, coming at you live from our newsroom here in Dublin. My own name is Gavan Casey and I'm joined once more by, this week, a very happy Cork man, just as I am myself, Mr. Eddie O'Sullivan. How are things?
Good, Gavin.
A fine weekend, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yeah. By all the boys in red came through.
All the boys in red came through. We are here to reflect not on Cork's Munster final victory, but the Lions' third test. It was supposed to be a decisive third test. Only that it wasn't, Eddie. A bit of a surreal finish at climax to an otherwise entertaining tour.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things out of the Lions tour, but probably the most anticlimactic part was the finish, like a draw, which is kind of, nobody's happy with that. You know, I think the Lions in the end, were defending their goal line, were happy to get out of there with a draw, but stepping back from it, you know, you'd feel like there must be some outcome to these events. They're so big. In every other tournament, whether it's the World Cup or the Six Nations, whatever, we have a way of separating the teams one way or the other, and once you lay that out at the beginning, everyone understands it, then you stick to that. But I think nobody thought about this on the final whistle, and then everyone's looking at each other going, well, what do we do now? So it was a bit of an anticlimax, but you know, either way it doesn't take from what the tour achieved or what the tour got done, and I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think it was the magnanimous success or phenomenal success everyone thinks it was, and I think it turned out maybe a lot better than people expected when we sat down the first day to look at it. Yeah,
big time. I suppose throughout the course of our conversations we've been a little bit careful with being too optimistic about the Lions going into certainly the second and third tests, and both of us probably felt, and you made the point that like with 15 men the All Blacks should get the job done really in the third test. It didn't transpire that way. What did the Lions do right? Like, how did they cope against 15 men so much better than they did in the first test? And I suppose conversely, where did it go wrong for the All Blacks, who were meant to be this all-conquering team?
There was probably three things that undid the All Blacks last weekend. If you look at it from where they'll sit down and say, well, what went wrong here? How come we didn't win the third test? There's probably three areas. One was, which is very unlike them, is they butchered some really good chances. They had 9 line breaks. Normally for the All Blacks, they score 5 tries from 9 line breaks. That's just the way they operate. Their precision on the line breaks. But you saw probably the 2 tries they got were well executed, but they had another 2 or 3 really good chances that they left behind them, which were game changers. So they'll look at that and go like, that's not on, and it's generally not on with them. They do take those chances. The second thing, again, the same old came back. Borden Barrett couldn't make his kicks. He didn't get too many opportunities, but he missed a very kickable conversion and a very kickable penalty. And that at the end of the day could have been the difference. And then the third one is, which is a bit of a problem for them right now, is their discipline. They had 9 penalties to the Lions 5. Some of those penalties were just innocuous, silly penalties. One before half time, like one of the centres ran around, I'm not sure which one, picked the ball up at the back of the ruck, like a schoolboy error. 3 points. Then even Kieran Reid, the start of the second half, first minute, the ball's on the halfway line, the ruck's on the halfway line, he plays Liam Williams through the ruck and throws him on the ground, and thinking, oh well, referee gives a penalty. Elliot Daly hammers it over in 50 odd metres, like innocuous penalties like that. And then of course, you know, did a yellow card again. Jerome Kano, careless tackle, gets 10 minutes in the bin. And people say, well, oh, the Lions kept it to 3 points in that 10 minutes, or the All Blacks kept the Lions to 3 points. Fine, but the other side of it is the All Blacks weren't going to score during that 10 minutes. They were trying to keep the score down. So if they look at it across a range of things, missed opportunities which they created, missing their kicks at goal, and their discipline let them down. If they'd fixed even one of those, they might have won the game. Having said that, the line side of it, what you have to show in the last 2 tests in particular, the Lions showed tremendous character. Like the series was slipping away from them in the second half, in the second test. In fact, for me, the turning point in the whole series was halfway through the second half. The Lions were onto the pump, and Borden Barrett put through a phenomenal grubber kick for Kieran Reid.
Into the left-hand corner, wasn't it?
Unfortunately, it went into the corner, and Elliot Daly won it, the race. Had that gone straight down the middle, I think Reid was under the sticks, scored a try, I think that was it. But that turned the game. The Lions came back, and from kind of everyone thinking, oh no, here we go, they turned it round. They got 2 tries, won the series, or won the test game, put the whole series back in the hopper. And then last weekend they hung in there as well. They kept hanging in there. Farrell was extraordinary. His kicking was phenomenal, and in Daly as well, that corker from that distance. And they just took advantage that the All Blacks didn't deliver, and they got them. And I suppose the big talking point then is the penalty that wasn't a penalty, that was a scrum. I mean,
Where do you go with that? Like,
Look, we're all delighted the Lions won, but that was a shocking decision by the referee. Like, it's one thing if a referee makes a bad decision, stops the game, looks at it and goes, I got that wrong, this is the right decision.
Yeah.
He did the opposite. His gut instinct was the right instinct. It was a penalty. Any day of the week, that's a penalty. Then he backed his way out of it. The way to look at that is, like, we might all go, oh, well, you know, that's the way it goes. It shouldn't go that way, because if it was reversed, if that was the All Blacks give up that penalty and he backed his way out of it and the Lions lost the chance to win the series, we'd be jumping up and down for days. So I think, in fairness, Hansen was very classy after. He didn't go after that. But to me, that was huge, a massive call. And how a referee of his experience talked his way out of the right decision to make the wrong decision is beyond me.
no, I think that's the main question here. It's kind of beyond everybody, because even when you review the footage, I would have imagined that Sam Warburton might have had a couple of whispers in his ear that might have influenced him. Now, I know you'll maintain that it shouldn't matter.
Shouldn't matter, no matter.
But he didn't even, you know.
How he got to a place where he thought, I can't give a penalty here, it's an accidental offside. After, you know, he played the ball, he caught the ball, and then he dropped it like it was about to detonate because he knew he'd made the mistake. And then to say, well, that was accidental, like that, by any standard, that's a dreadful decision. And that did decide the series. Now, Barrett had to kick it and he had missed a couple.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I feel that might have gone through, you know. But here's the other thing you have to say, though. Let's say he gave the penalty like he should have and Barrett kicked it and the Lions lost the series on that. You know, I think we shouldn't get carried away one way or the other. We should look at the narrative on the overall. We drew the series. I don't think we were as good as maybe we're telling ourselves. I think we did a lot of things right as the Lions to stay in the series, but I think the All Blacks will look back and say that they let it slip. They will look at that. At the same time, had Barrett got the penalty and kicked it and the All Blacks won the series, we would have to say the Lions achieved a lot in the series. You know, they did put the brand back on the map in terms of competing with the best team in the world. So there was a lot of good there, but it's not all as outstandingly brilliant as some people would have you believe.
Yeah, but I guess probably a little bit better than we might have believed coming into it.
Of course, because I think, again, if you look at it, and you can say the All Blacks, they had a number of injuries in their back line. That didn't help them. No, that's life in the fast lane. You've got to deal with that, and they didn't deal with it very well. Their place kicker didn't come through. Barrett didn't deliver. And I have a feeling, on a segue, is that they need another playmaker in their midfield pretty soon. Like
the All Blacks?
Yeah, like Conrad Smith. And the solution there could be Bowden Barrett. He could play 12.
So you put Cruden 10 and Barrett 12?
Yeah, sorry, there could be Geordie Barrett.
All right, okay.
Bowden Barrett 10, Geordie Barrett at 12. So the two Barretts can play first and second 5/8. And I think then they have a place kicker or quality in Geordie Barrett. So that might be something, that's just a notion I have that might work better for them, because
maybe having a word
they haven't delivered the same midfield potency that they had over years with Nanu and with Conrad Smith. And Conrad Smith was a key guy there as a playmaker. He was an incredibly intelligent footballer. So going forward, they're going to have to find that solution there, that when Crotty is out, what are they going to do for another playmaker? Because they keep the ball in hand so much that it's very hard to deliver, you know, the perfect game plan off one playmaker all the time. And if you know it's that playmaker, you can put certain things in place. But that's a bit of a segue. But having said that, Barrett didn't deliver in the kicking stakes, and their discipline, a red card and a yellow card and a lot of silly penalties in the last test cost them. So they would probably look at it and say they didn't play to par. But you look at the other side, and the Lions did a lot of things right. They got their selection right. I think the first selection was good. The adjustments Warren Gatland made with Itoje and Warburton paid dividends as well.
Yeah.
You know, the selections were good. The team played with a lot of heart, a lot of spirit. They hung in there when things were going wrong, and they made the best of a bad situation a few times, and they earned the draw, albeit by somewhat default, but they got there. And as a Lions, as an entity, I think going to New Zealand, we didn't give them a load of chances, but they hung in there and got, you know, a pretty decent outcome at the end of it. And I think they have to get credit for that as well. Yeah,
I mean, one man who's going to get a lot of credit, and it's maybe debatable how much he warrants, but Warren Gatland, for him, the tour comes as probably a bit of a vindication, given some of the naysayers' attitudes towards him, and even in New Zealand.
Well, I think most of the naysayers were in New Zealand.
Do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think, which always happens. Like, they pounded the lard out of Clive Woodward in 2005, and he didn't help himself with the way he set things up with Alistair Campbell and stuff. But all that, they do that. Like, I've been to New Zealand, and they do pound you if you give them an opportunity. So he was always going to get extra special treatment being a New Zealander,
Yeah.
So I don't know if he handled it the best at times. He probably should have kept it down a bit, and we said that. But at the end of the day, he got the result. Like, he got the draw, and he gets credit for that. It was a very harmonious tour. Fellas looked like they were enjoying themselves, which is a hard thing to do on a Lions tour. We've got a huge number of players. He justified his bringing 41 players. I still don't think he can stand over the geography of 6 still. I don't think that's a good idea.
They could form a band, I'd say.
If he had it back, he wouldn't have done that. But look, you're nitpicking. I mean, it was a harmonious tour. They played very well. They rode their luck a bit, but they got a good result at the end of it. So, like, those tours in New Zealand, as we saw, 05 can go horribly wrong, and you don't get anywhere near it. And it wouldn't be the first time a Lions tour has gone under early doors in New Zealand. So, yeah, he's achieved a lot in that respect, and he has to get credit for that. But I think, by and large, the worst of treatment he got was from the New Zealand media, because that's where they roll. When you're down there, like, they're very protective of their team, and certainly a lot of it was extremely harsh and unnecessary. I mean, but
I guess they probably felt comfortable in doing it, given that he is one of their own, more so.
I think they would have done it to anybody. It doesn't matter. They are very protective of the All Blacks. Like, ironically, they can be hypercritical of the All Blacks, provided it's them, but nobody else is allowed to be. So it's
not least Claire McNamara had an article dedicated to her, of course, for a simple post-match interview with Steve Hansen after that November test. So like, but that's the way it is. Look, I've been in New Zealand many times, and it's a tough place to tour, but it's just, you don't get hung up on that. That's the way it is there. They're going to give you a hard time. They're going to root for their team, the media, and that's just the way it is. So, but I think all that took up a lot of column inches unnecessarily, because it was interesting stuff at the front end of the week. When you got to the business end of the week, where the game was played, I think the Lions did very well. There was one stage there where we thought that they might really struggle week to week, but they got some big results against the bigger franchises, and then recovered after a pretty disastrous first test. They looked like they were in big trouble to eke out the win, and then rode their luck a bit but got the draw. So look, you have to give credit where credit is due, but it wasn't the greatest test series of all time. I'm not buying into that by any stretch. It was interesting, it's exciting, but it wasn't the greatest test series of all time. Okay, well, yeah, there's probably a couple of people who maybe would agree with that, depending on which channel you're watching it, I guess. But there's a question here from Brian Midlennon. He was wondering, is Warren Gatland the man to take them to South Africa in 4 years' time?
Yeah, of course, why not? I mean, he's done Australia, he's done New Zealand, why not South Africa? South Africa is not as tough as New Zealand.
But I suppose we don't know how tough it's going to be in 4 years' time either.
So it's kind of a bit premature, because 4 years' time, who knows where anyone will be. But as at this moment in time, if you go to South Africa in the morning, yeah, of course he would.
Would he be willing to do it again? I mean, it is an enormous pressure.
I think he would, because he would. I think I'm not only guessing, but I would say, I'm not trying to talk on his behalf, but I think he would, because he won the series in Australia, and they probably didn't get a lot of credit for that, because Australia are not what they used to be. He had drawn series in New Zealand, so if he'd go to South Africa and win a series in South Africa, which the Lions could do, it depends on where South Africa are in 4 years' time. If it was this year, they'd probably won a series in South Africa, because they're kind of trying to find themselves still.
Yeah.
But in 4 years' time, who knows where South Africa would be? They maybe won the World Cup, or they could be in a different place. But yeah, he'd take that on. He'd have to take it on. I can't imagine he wouldn't want to.
Where does he stand in the sort of pantheon of coaches at the moment? He's a divisive figure for some reason, and very often that sort of criticism will spill into his coaching as opposed to him as a person. But you can't really argue with his record now, can you?
His record's outstanding. But people's mistake is that because he irks people at times in the way he says things in the media, or the way he challenges people, they mistake that for the person. There's a bit of his personality in it, but I think ultimately he's also likes to play a few games, and he knows he'll get a reaction. So that's the way he rocks. And people know are disappointed if he doesn't say something, But that has nothing to do with what he's achieved. His achievements stand on their own. Same at Wales, same with the Lions now. So yeah, absolutely, he has established himself as, like, even if you think about it, Ian McGeechan, who was the kind of the Lion King for years as somebody who's been involved at Lions as a player, as a coach, had great success. Warren Gatland is in that sphere now as well. Obviously, after 2 Lions tours as head coach, a win and a draw. I don't know if anyone's done that as a Lions head coach.
Yeah, will he be as willing to do those montages set to slow instrumentals though, is the real question 4 years down the line. I can't wait for Gatland to be wheeled out every 4 years and really get the juices flowing. Conor Linnan has a question here. He says, given the injuries to Payne, Henshaw, O'Brien and Sexton, what kind of shape are Ireland in for November in the Six Nations?
Yeah, it could be tricky. I think the Six Nations will be alright, because I think they'll be back, but the autumn could be a tricky one. And I remember back in 2005 we lost O'Driscoll with the shoulder blowout, and we lost O'Connell with a back injury at the start of the season, and we went to that autumn series in 2005 without the 2 of them, which was hugely disruptive, and we got hammered by, we played the All Blacks in 2005 and they wiped us out. But these guys may not be around, and Ringrose as well is looking like he's definitely going to miss the autumn, so it's slim pickings in the middle of the field at the moment. So there could be issues there in terms of, I think you're playing South Africa, not Argentina and Fiji. Certainly those Argentina and South Africa would be 2 big tests. Where we go in the midfield
for a lot of the young guys though? Yeah,
everyone says that's great and you lose. Of course, but of course it's an opportunity, but like every national coach, when you're going into those games, you pick the best team available to you because you want to win. You give yourself the best chance of winning. If your hands are tied with injuries, then you go to the next man up, and that's you go. Yeah, it's great to give them experience, but until they lose, and then people are pound you for losing, as we find out. But I think Joe Schmidt will have to play the hand he's dealt in the autumn, but it could be a weak hand in the middle of the field, depending, I suppose, particularly on Sexton, how he comes out of it. But certainly, I think Henshaw, Ringrose are in trouble, and Payne could be in trouble. Who knows with those migraines how long that lasts? So the midfield thing could be up in the air, which is not a great thing. But I suppose if it means he'll have him back for the spring, for the Six Nations, I think any coach would say, all right, I'm going to have problems, let me have it in the autumn, and let the ship be righted in the spring. That's when it's more important. Yeah,
for sure. Are there any Irish players who emerged from this tour maybe with a little bit more credit than they had when they went over there? I'm thinking back to 2013, how Conor Murray went on to become probably the best scrum half in the world, and it seemed to be the Lions tour which was the catalyst in him kicking on.
Well, I think Conor Murray copper fastened his position as the best scrum half in the world. I mean, I know I got a bit of flack for saying that, because people are talking about Aaron Smith and that, but I just say go back to Chicago. There was toe-to-toe that day, even in the second test. Now Paranara come on, but I think Murray has copper fastened himself into rugby history in Ireland as probably at the moment the best scrum half in the world, and who'll argue after that he's not right up there. I think, to be fair, Johnny Sexton, like a lot of us are worried, him going out on that tour, his form wasn't great at the end of the season. We were worried that the physicality of that tour, whether he'd come through it intact, but he's more than come through it. He's picked up an injury again, ironically, at the very end. Yeah. But in terms of his performance, I think he's delivered. Sean O'Brien back to his best if he can stay healthy, but then he's injured again now. I probably Ian Henderson, we probably had hoped might get a better shot. I think he did. I think you can't blame him. I thought he delivered brilliantly. He just didn't get the nod into that back row. It was very competitive, but in fairness, he pushed all the right buttons. Tyke Furlong was outstanding, I thought, right through. He went out, a lot of pressure on him. He was the heir apparent, and he delivered. So I think, the Irish lads have delivered well over the course of the tour. And I felt Rory Best, probably if he didn't start the test, I felt he deserved a shot on the bench for one of them, But I feel bad that he didn't get that. But, I don't think he don't have to side down at all.
Yeah, for sure. For the lads, say then, that didn't quite figure in the test or only had fleeting appearances. You think of Peter O'Malley captaining the first test, he doesn't feature in the second two. CJ Stander kind of cameo appearance towards the end. And you mentioned Henderson there as well. Do these guys then come back from a Lions tour and feel as though they have something to prove on an international front, particularly against Wales, for example?
I don't think so. No, I don't think they get hung up on that. I think they're professional guys. They know that you go out on a Lions tour and there's 40 odd guys on the squad and only 15 get picked to start, so the odds are against you. They're not in your favour making it. You can be unlucky with an injury, as you saw with Jared Payne. You can be lucky with an injury, as we saw with some other players, or you can just not get the nod for whatever reason the coach you feel you should be in. So you run the gauntlet in that, but these guys go out, having been on the Lions tour, play for the Lions, you are a Lion now, so you don't have anything to prove. I think they'll come back now, and what I've always found with players, whether it's coming from their provincial camp into Ireland or going from an Irish camp into a Lions and back, is they just change hats. They just do it as professionalism. They just put on their Irish hat in November, they put on their Munster hat in September, or their Leinster hat or whatever, and that's what it's about for them, you know. And they stay in that kind of focus zone because ultimately it's their job, and ultimately their job is, you know, measured on their performances.
Yeah.
So if you're going to let your head kind of spin out of control, like you're thinking the Lions when you're playing for Munster, or you're thinking of Munster when you're playing for Ireland, it never works out well. So these guys are so professional, they just go from one job to the next job and they do the best job they can wherever they are. So I don't think that's an issue at all, and I think the next time we play Wales, it won't make any difference.
Fair enough. There is a couple of questions here actually about Ireland's midfield as we were talking about it. Who is asking? Aidan McCabe asks, what about Bundy Aki for the Irish midfield in November? I mean, he actually could feature by default now, the way things are going, I guess.
Yeah, he's in the hopper, yeah, as I say, because he's qualified and he's playing with Connacht. A lot will depend on his form now for the first few months. You know, like in fairness, what Joe Schmidt can't do next November is start picking guys on reputation. Even if there's injuries, he's got to pick what he believes are the form guys, the guys who are going to go out and play well. And you know, if he delivers for Connacht, then he will. If he's next man up, he'll get the shot. But it's up to him now to put that on the table for Joe Schmidt and say, right, I'm here, I'm ready to go. I wouldn't be picking him now because, you know, he had a great season last year. That's not how it should work or how it does work. So he's got to deliver that, and I'd say like there was some young guys in the Tour of Japan this year that did well.
You have Chris Farrell coming over from France as well.
Yeah, all those guys. But I think, to be honest, let's not get away from the fact that if everyone's available for South Africa and Argentina, he would pick his best team, because they're games you want to win, they're games you have to win if you can. Fiji is the one he probably has a little wriggle room, which you do in a tier 2 nation, but he may not have a full deck to play with because you have the injuries now, who guys who may not make it back, and we still have the front end of the season, including Europe, which often has its casualties as well. Yeah,
speaking of Europe actually, and maybe this is an old-fashioned question, but sometimes worth asking, I think, there's always perceived to be a gap in quality between the two hemispheres. Did this Lions tour, given that New Zealand are this all-conquering team, prove that gap is narrowing slightly, I suppose, in terms of individual player ability as opposed to teams?
I think, well, the short answer is yes, the gap is narrowing, but it's probably been narrowing for a while. You know, if you go through to the last World Cup even, you know, like I think the gaps are closing. And the problem probably in looking at that is New Zealand are a little bit separate than everybody else. You know, let's be honest, they are a cut above.
So it's kind of like Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand.
Yeah, they are the best team in the world and have been. And going back to the Lions series, I think they'd be kicking themselves they didn't deliver as they wanted to. It'll be interesting to see how they go in the Rugby Championship in the summer now. You know, how they deliver over that tournament. So yeah, I think New Zealand are a cut, but South Africa have been through their problems. I mean, it's not impossible to beat South Africa in the last couple of years. They think they've turned the corner. You know, they've beaten France 3 times, but hold on a minute. Like, that's not a benchmark, I think, in beating France at the end of their long season at home in South Africa. So I think there's something to be proved there. And by all accounts, Australia are in a bad state at the moment. You know, they lost to Scotland, they fell across the line against Italy. They're probably, for whatever reason, at their weakest at the moment as a tri-nation. So the gap is closing, but maybe not because we're getting so much better, but other teams are coming back just a bit, or a bit of both. Okay, fair enough. Well, that offers some hope for November anyway, depending on how Ireland's midfield shapes up. That is all we've got time for here on the Rugby Show on the 42.ie. My thanks to you, Eddie, as per usual. We'll speak to you soon. Thanks to you guys at home who have followed our coverage throughout the Lions tour. We'll be back again, no doubt. And actually, a special thanks to the people from New Zealand who've been tuning in and commenting, saying they've enjoyed it. It's pretty cool to have those guys on board as well. So have a good couple of weeks, and we'll speak to you soon. Until then, take it easy.